So I'm going to pass it on down the line, introduce yourself to the audience, and tell us who you are and what you do. And why are you sitting up here on stage?
I don't know. Hi. My name is Jonathan Camacho, and Christian and I are the owners of the Creatives Factory, which is a music production studio here in Dallas. And we've been doing that on the production side for about 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20
More
years. And yeah, we've been doing production, and then we added a visual space to our business. But I guess the primary reason why we're here is because of our work with music and with film and all of that. So I actually graduated from North Texas with a composition degree. Call any mean green in here? Let's go. Call.
All right.
That's what we do. And so I did that because I wanted to do, I always wanted to do music production and, work in pop and hip hop and all of that. But I also wanted to work in film. And so that's what I studied in college. And I didn't get a chance to work on my first film until 9 years after college, after I had done a lot of just pop and hip hop and rock production. So I, worked on a film for the Rio Olympics. And then the last time I was actually at the Texas Theater, it was for the premiere of another film that I scored called What Carter Lost, which was one of the ESPN 30 for 30 films based on one of the Oak Cliff football teams, so on Carter High School. So that was the first, the pretty big full-length film that I've done. And then just working with a lot of pop, artists, working on a lot of productions. And Chris and I have had the opportunity to also work on commercial work and, stuff that's gotten placed in the most random things that shows that I keeping up with the Kardashians and stuff that I've never watched and probably will never watch, but the music fit. So, that's a shortened bio, I think.
I'm Chris, everything that he said. So I studied at UTA, so jazz studies. That's why I'm kind of all right, guys, the bonding. Anybody UTA here? Nobody? All right.
There you go.
Hey, I'm not alone. But I'm in charge of artist development, and then in that mix is making sure all the paperwork is from the beginning kosher, so that whenever it gets to production and getting it into movies and film or whatever it finds a home at, that everything's ready to go. That's part of my role. Is also new business and just keeping most of the day-to-day operations at our studios intact. And we all work together because I mean he's a mentor to me. We've also I always say this, bro. But he's a mentor to me. Every time I've done a music life change, he's but
I'm younger than him.
Mix. He's and I say that because we all worked on a company called Kids Bop. Have you ever heard of Kids Bop? So when Kids Bop launched, they launched out of Dallas, and we were part of that team. And someone that you never know who you're going to meet and network, and that's why I'm glad that you guys are here, because this is very important. You never know who's in the room. You never know who's your next mentor, friend, or connection. And although at the time, now he's way bigger than us, but he's a producer as well. And you Google music production, both of our stuff popped up. And although we were in competition, he's really one of our greatest friends and family, really extended family. And we asked him to be here because he's very knowledgeable on the film side. He'll tell you more about that. But I say that because you never know who you're going to meet and how you're going to connect. So congratulations to you guys. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
I'm the second half of the Creatives Factory, and Amin will introduce himself.
Well, I appreciate Christian. After that, I don't know what,
Bro, please.
I appreciate it. Now, the guys are great. My name is Amin Imam. I've been in music business over 25 years. And my major was completely different. Actually, I went to school for engineering, then changed to biology. I got lucky, started making money in music. So I'm like, man, I just need to go back and see what the heck am I doing? So that's how kind of my career started. But I literally got involved with commercial work, television work. I got lucky being in, the right place at the right time. So my background, I'm doing a lot of composition work, a lot of music for commercials, television, that was the bread and butter here. And then I started going to LA as far as from music supervision to composition arrangement. So it kind of became a broad deal all the way to brand integration. And then when when Chuck moved here, I was already moved to LA. When Chuck moved here, his son started another production company. So I ended up coming back, started working with them here. So that's kind of became almost like a 15-year kind of a deal for me, multiple TV shows and a lot of different things. So that's kind of the gist of it as far as the background.
So much more.
So it sounds like we've got a pretty awesome panel for everybody tonight then, which is really great. So as we get started here, kind of by a raise of hands in the audience, who here is on the film side, whether it's film, commercial, YouTube, digital, whatever else, where you're trying to figure out how to get your projects scored or music into your projects? So a good number of people. And then how many people are on the music side where you're musicians and you're trying to figure out what to do with your music? How do you get it in the right places? How do you get it into film, TV, commercials, everything else? Okay, so we're kind of half and half. It looks like we're split pretty evenly, so that's good. So we'll kind of spread the questions around on both sides, because I think if you understand one side, it helps you understand the
Definitely.
other
Sure.
side as well. So let's start off then talking a little bit about, let's say you are a musician and you're working on whatever you're working. I know it's all across the board, because you can literally create an entire composition, just with your computer now without even having to play a single instrument, right? So just talk a little bit about, you are a composer, you're a musician, you've created music, you're doing whatever you're doing, you're a songwriter, whatever it is, and you have no idea how to get started to get your piece of music into anything, commercial, short film, independent film, YouTube videos, whatever it might be. I know that's a lot to kind of, there's a million different ways to start, but just let's kind of get the ball rolling there.
Well, I'll kind of start that. So anytime we get into that conversation, the first answer to that is usually an uncomfortable one. It's usually, you have to kind of ask yourself, is what I have good enough to be in a film? And that isn't necessarily stylistically is it good enough, because there's a lot of, really interesting things in different films. Like I've done cues where it's like one sound and they're like, that's perfect. And I'm like, I hit one button. Cool. And then there's other cues that I've done that it's just like this entire orchestral thing, and they're just like, it's not right. It needs more. So you just, it's not like a subjective, is it good? But honestly, it's across the board sonically is, can it compete with, something that is on the radio? Like when you're watching TV and you listen to a Target ad, like that track that's playing is a banger. Like that, I've seen, you're listening to stuff and it's just like, this is great. Like this could be on the radio tomorrow. And that doesn't just have to do with the composition side of it. That has to do with, like, does it sound mixed? Does it sound mastered? Are they the right sounds? Are they the best sounds? Like, if it's a string composition, does it sound like real strings? Like all of those things that have to get taken care of, because what you're competing with is people that can put together something that sounds like a major production in a few hours. So, like, the first question, honestly, is it good enough? And I think when we started, like, I look back to when I started producing, and I listened back to some of those tracks, and it was like, these were not good enough. Christian and I did a project many moons ago that for us, it was a project that kind of took like all of those skills and just kind of put them through the ringer. And it was a project where we had to write, and it was specifically for TV and film, and we had to write 2 albums in Spanish in different genres, write, record, produce, mix.
Find the artist
to sing them, and it was for Universal Music Group. and we had to do it in like a month and a half. And I mean, I remember you're scheduling things, you're doing all of these kinds of things, and it was a project that just forced us to. The songs have to be great. They have to be approved by this person, who has to approve them by this person. So, like, asking yourself, first of all, do I have songs that are actually good enough? And that's not always an easy question to answer. And that's a question that you have to answer first and foremost before you can talk about anything, about submitting, about actual, networking. And I think Chris can speak into the next part of that a little bit more, which is like, if you do have something, it's honestly what we're doing here, which is the relationship building and networking.
And I think no artist in this room likes to hear it's kind of good. So you have to be okay with a team that's not always a yes team, because if you're surrounded by yes people, you're dying. Like every time we have an idea, even if it comes to fruition, we say, okay, let's look at it, not like we birthed it, shoot everything that's really bad about it down, and whatever survives, that's what should go forth, right? So if you think that your music is the greatest thing on the planet, like, give it to some people that will be really honest with you. Like, always. But yes, on the second half of that is all the opportunities that we've had, every single one of them is because we've networked, we've had coffee, drinks, hung out. It wasn't always about, well, hey, what can you do for me? Oh, here's my music. Like, nobody cares about your music. I know you don't want to hear that, but we can find music anywhere and anytime. Like, there's libraries and libraries. It ends up being like, okay, well, hey man, this is a good guy. I want to work with him. And I don't need a lot of good people, if you've been out there, that are honest or whatever, and I've been in a lot of markets. We all have been. And it's like, sometimes you try to get gypped. They try to give you a contract that's 30 pages long, and there's words like perpetual and things like that you should be like really careful with, and it's like you can end up with a song that you really love that's no longer yours. And so you want to build these connections that you can trust. They can trust you. If they ask you to deliver, you deliver, and that you're open to any kind of changes. We've had artists that are this style, and then they get commissioned to do another style, and then they don't like it, and it's like, you got to consider this as a credit for you. This isn't a leveling up. So having the best of attitude, positive attitude, an open attitude, a mindset where it's like, okay, how can I connect the bridge? Maybe this song that I'm going to have to create doesn't really fit who I am as an artist, but it is something that I'm asked to do, and maybe my future catalog can be looked at. It has to do with dealing with relationships and knowing how to run business deals and connections, and putting yourself aside for most of the part, because it's about the music and it's about the film. So if you're walking in with hey, it's about my music, that's already a red flag.
That's a huge lesson that I think I learned on the film side of it. Is I was super blessed with a really good director that, and I'll tell this story because we're talking about stuff, and I can only speak from my experiences, but to kind of say off the relationship. So the ESPN film that I scored was the result of another thing that I'd done with a buddy of mine, and I didn't get that job because I submitted for something or because I sent out an email, I sent out my portfolio to a bunch of different places and I got it. I had a friend that was in the industry and he got called to do a film, and he was moving to LA and he couldn't do the film. And he called the director and said, hey, I have a friend who you should call. I can't do it, but he can. So one, he trusted me. He put his word in there that said he can actually do it. He's not going to let you down. So again, having that ability to take care of it, because I don't want to mess his name up. I don't want to mess, I get an opportunity to make him look bad. But it was because he let me in, and then I was able to actually get the job done. And with that first director that I worked with, he was really, really sweet with me and took time to kind of tell me, hey, this is not about you. This is not about your music. This is not about that. Like, we are telling a story here. And that's why I also think when you're talking about like your music as an artist, it may be different than the music that you submit for film and TV, because as an artist, you want to say something very specific, and I think there's something very sacred about that. But when there is a film that has a scene that is saying something very specific and sacred to the director, like the film takes precedence, like it just does. And as musicians, we don't want to hear that, and that was a really hard pill for me to swallow. But like the music in that film is only to serve you watching that actor play that scene that gets this point across, not like, oh my God, that was a very poetic whatever. Like, it's just for the sake of that. And so it's understanding your role in that scenario. Like, if you need to play quarterback that day, or if you need to play, wide receiver, or if you need to be the water boy, like, that's kind of our role as musicians, because we're here to tell stories. Yeah. And sometimes in a film, it's not your story, and you have to be able to tell somebody else's story, which I think is what helps us with production, because we did come from the artist world. Like, we've had our own like artist projects before. Like, I've had bands before, and you tell your own story and all of that. But with production, we get to tell other people's stories. We get to have conversations with artists and figure out what they want, right, and then help them tell their story. And I think that, like, all three of us have done that with production, yeah, and that helps us. Like, a director is just another artist that we're saying, what's the story that you want to tell, and then how can we tell that? And that's a skill that you have to learn.
Now,
okay.
Go
ahead.
Oh, I was going to say there's another component that I know Amin can talk about is if you have a good song and you have the network, the technical part can stop you too.
So there's two things. I actually want to expand on John, one thing that he said originally. So if you have your own song, as far as not a score, just like let's say your song you want to pitch to somebody, he's correct. It has to be mixed right, and it has to be mastered. And so you can't really look at it as a demo, because there's no second chances on those things. I normally get 24 hours to match a song that they're going to come to a theater like this and compare it to a big hit on the radio that they cannot afford. So your song is being compared to a song they spent $10,000 that mastered it. So it has to be almost matching that. That's the uphill battle for independent artists to get a cut. Unless your social media is killing it, because that's what they're looking at right now. And everything's changed for artists right now. Right now, even I look for artists on a current movie project that I have. There's two artists that, one of them, when she sings, she gets about 5 million views on her actual videos, and she just sings a cappella. So obviously, no matter what, I want to get her involved in the score or a song, just because of her marketing ability.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you're popping off on social media. You can skip this whole talk.
Yeah. So social media and AI are the two things that are going to completely throw this whole talk in a whole nother direction. But one of the things that's what's happening is it's a very short time to present your stuff, and it has to be same level. And I'm not talking about loudness, because everybody's about mastering their song really loud. It's not about loudness. It's about clarity. So my suggestion is get a really good mastering guy. It's not about mastering it in your bedroom. I do it myself because I have to sometimes, but I send it out to get it done. It's worth it, and there's a lot of deals you can get to do it. So that's kind of, one of the things. That's why your stuff is getting compared to the biggest guy, and it's not a demo. At that point, they have to make a decision because they're cutting to that, right? Or they have to replace that song.
Well, let's talk a little bit then about the independent filmmakers in the room who don't have a ton of budget, don't have a ton of money to find music for their projects. And so I know I've done it before in my projects. I'm sure a lot of others have. You go online and there's like Soundstripe, and there's all these different sources where you can just literally scroll through, you're picking by genre and beats per minute and like looking for songs, and you'll literally be there and you listen to the first 5 seconds, be like, nope, next one, nope, next one, nope, next one. Because as a filmmaker, what you're looking for and what you want to match. So from the filmmaker perspective, you know, if they reach out to any of you and are like, I need a song, you said, you know, sounds like something on the radio. I need a song that sounds like you two, you know, for this particular scene because this is what I'm trying to get across. But I only have $1,000
Right.
to spend on this piece of music for the film. Like, how do you help them? What do you tell them in those scenarios? Just go to one of the online platforms, or like, you know, what is like?
So
what's a resource for them?
actually, that's a very good question. Because on the last movie I worked on, I did that. I actually told the director, "Hey, these songs." Because right now, if the movie's low budget, most likely it's going to go to streaming. So normally licensing for streaming is much cheaper, and you can do a lot of deals. You can do essentially step deals with the you know, whoever is getting the song and all that stuff. So, and Universal is buying out all those libraries. So when some of these big companies buying out these libraries, these are like some of these songs that we got for like $200 a piece, that essentially I did the music supervisor job for the director, just sat down and started listening to these. And they're essentially, it's the B side of some major artist that was signed to Universal. Obviously, they want to make $200 out of that or something, right? So there's ways to work out a package deal with some of those entities. So you say, hey, I got my total budget for licensing is $2,000, and sometimes they give you unlimited. You know, obviously, if it goes anywhere, they're going to make some back end on that. But they have to move that library. What's cool about some of those services are, especially something like Universal, they actually have an in-house music supervisor. So, and these guys know, so they become your account manager, so they know your catalog, right? So if you tell them, hey, I need a song like this, and then they will send you that stuff. You know, then instead of going through 1,000 songs, you're going through, you know, 200, right?
Yeah.
So, but if it's a specific scene, my suggestion is whenever you're editing your movie, use temp tracks, right? Use exactly the real thing you want to do it. And then you find out how many cues you have, because now there's ways of, okay, you know what? I need 5 cues to be scored. The rest I can get from my music library. So on that 5 cues, what is the budget that I can afford to do that?
Well, and on the music side of it, also, like, okay, so who's an artist in here, like a music artist? Okay, keep your hands up. Who produces? Keep your hand up if you've produced your own stuff. Okay, so pretty good. A lot of hands raised, but this isn't to say that you shouldn't work with a producer, because like, we're producers and we want people to work with. So like, I'm not trying to talk myself out of a job, but that being said, like, you're competing with people that are artists and producers and mix engineers and mastering engineers. So it's like the quantity of tracks that they can take care of and the variety of tracks that they can take care of, even under different pseudonyms, is like, that's a huge advantage. So on the artist side of it, like, and I do want to get back to specifically what you asked, but like on the artist side of it, it's the idea of like, okay, well, I'm working on my artist project, but let's say I'm stuck and I don't really feel inspired for this, but I really like this artist growing up, which is not my genre. So I'm going to spend some time working on some songs that are in this genre. It's a lot easier for producers to do that because we like working in different genres. But as an artist, you know, if you're doing the rock thing and you're like, there's a lot of singer-songwriter, folky stuff that's being placed. Let me work on a couple of those things. I don't have to release it in my artist project. But one, that's going to give me a bigger catalog, which is what he's talking about, quantity. You're walking in as an artist saying, hey, I've got 150 tracks that I'm never going to release as an artist. Like, that's a conversation any filmmaker will have with you, that are, you know, mixed properly and mastered properly and all of that kind of stuff. And that also gives you inspiration for your own artist project, because like, you're understanding how songs work. You write 150 songs and you're going to become a better songwriter. So going back to that conversation of, okay, you've got a low budget, that goes into also understanding the business side of it, where it's, how do we, like, let's have a conversation with the filmmaker. okay, you can't, like, I had a film where it was like, okay, this isn't the biggest budget, but can I get this other song that I wrote and produced as the end credits track? You know, and it's like, okay, well, let's be a little business savvy. You give me this, I'll give you that. We both want the same thing, which is I want my music heard, you want your film seen, so let's work together in order to make that happen.
And I want my fence fixed, by the way. There's some other bartering.
I
that you
mean,
can do. Yeah.
you know, whatever you have to do, man.
Well, let's say, so, in some scenarios, a filmmaker will have a specific song in mind that maybe is by a bigger artist or whatever. So I'll give a little example. So I made a short film back 2016 or something like that, and there's this band from the 1980s called The Outfield. I don't know how many people are familiar with The Outfield. Josie's on a vacation far away, that band, whole thing. Well, they had a different song that's not that song. Like, that's their super popular song. And I wanted the song in my film. So I literally just figured out who to reach out to, and they said, and it was Cobalt Music, right, publishing, I think. And it was a short film. We were just going to play film festivals. I'm going to throw it on YouTube. That was it. And they're like, what do you want to spend? I said, $500. And they're like, okay. And so for $500, I got a song in my short film from what was a huge band in the 1980s with a hit song. And so it's a recognizable, really cool tune by a great band from the 1980s that is the opening song in this short film. And it cost $500. So maybe talk a little bit about, someone has something specific in mind, or they want to reach out to a specific artist. Like, how do you even start doing that? Like, how do I even start reaching out to The Outfield or whoever else if I'm trying to figure out, I just want to find out what it costs to put this song in.
Actually, that's a really good thing, the way you hit. So 2 things. First of all, for pitching your movie, you can use any song. Nobody cares. Because you're not making money from it.
Right.
And as long as, if you have it on YouTube or Vimeo probably is the safe spot for people to watch it, because YouTube, the copyright side of it might take it down because you don't have the rights to it. So you can totally use that. To do licensing for festivals, it's really cheap. Everybody works with you, $500, $200, whatever there is.
Yeah.
They will work with you. The key, it really comes down to when the distributor picks it up. So, and what typically happens is, if you can afford a music supervisor, I would do that. Because the job of a music supervisor is not just finding the songs for you, legally going after who owns the master on this thing, then who owns the publishing. They never tell you what the price is, because the first thing they're going to ask you, what does the other guy say? Because it's what they call a favorite nation. So it's the highest price that you have to pay everybody.
Yeah.
So that's why it's really a difficult thing. So I would normally go, and there's music supervisors that they will work with you on that end to really help you with your movie. Because as Jonathan says, he may come and say, hey, he may go to a publisher and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to take this song from you, but can you give me these 3 other songs? I think it's going to work for this movie for the same price. Normally, they're not going to say no to it. And nowadays, there's a lot of companies that own master and publishing, which is really the people you want to go to, because then you're dealing with only one person. But as far as researching, ASCAP and BMI, they have a database that they tell you who owns the publishing side.
And that's which I think Chris is about to speak into on the artist side of it. I can sense it coming.
It's coming at you.
On the artist side of it, like if you're on the artist side of it and you're like, why am I not getting calls? Like, I've got this great, like, on The Outfield, and obviously they did the right things, but like, let's say I'm The Outfield back in the 1980s and I didn't register my songs and I didn't do this, then there's no chance on the artist side of me for me to be found.
Right, and I think you were looking for The Outfield, but sometimes there's a filmmaker in town that really likes a local band and just is about Dallas. And the filmmaker wants to put, you can put it in like Amin said, but at the end of the day, if it's going to go anywhere, the artist has to have their stuff together. Right. If you don't have your stuff registered, if all your paperwork's not in line, if you
samples
can't say,
can't be using samples.
none of the samples can be used. Like, it's your song, it's got to be registered. And a lot of the questions that we get asked, is it a one-stop shop? Have you guys heard that phrase? Anybody? Okay. Do you guys? For those of you that have not heard that, it's, can you make the decision as a publishing company for this? You've got everybody that's involved giving you the ability to make a choice for this, and if your publisher can't do that, and they're not. He said 24 hours to get a song in the film. Not
wish we had
not-
24 hours.
We get briefs, and it's like by
End of
5
the
o'clock
day.
today,
Yeah,
and
end
it's
of the
noon,
day.
you know, and it's like there's no way that you're going to clear something in hours. So if it's not a one-stop shop, there's your opportunity, like for that. It might have been the perfect song. Could have been the perfect. Sometimes in a way, blue moon, they may, because they like you or there's something, God's grace came upon you, a light came on you. But most times there's like 5 other songs that are already cleared. They're already good. It's like, okay, let's just go with something that's fast. We gotta move.
Well, let's talk about the scenario a little bit then. Let's say you're a local filmmaker and you have a friend that's a local musician and they've written an original piece of music, their band or whatever else, and it's like, I want to use your band to do my short film or feature film or documentary or whatever it might be. I really like this song you guys did, and they just like, okay, here you go. Here's the recording of it. They stick it in the film, and then they do whatever they do with it. Probably not a great idea to go that route because there's all kinds of then legal hurdles if you want to distribute and everything else. Talk about a scenario like that where you're just like, I just got a friend who's got a cool song and I want to stick it in my.
Well, if that-
how does that work for the band? How does that work for both sides?
If the artist doesn't do their due diligence, then the film director is going to have a great day, because they just got a free song that has no legal ties to anything, and so. Like there's 2 kinds of money that you're making with film and TV. You're making front end money and you're making back end money. So, like front end money is sync licensing fees. Like, hey, I want to use your song, and we've got a budget straight up for 20 grand for the song or whatever. So, bam, just to use it, I've got to pay you this up front. Song, like let's say it is the local song, and it's like, hey, I'll give you $500 to use the song. Cool. Bam, we've taken care of it, but now all of a sudden that short film ends up going to Netflix, ends up going to this, ends up blowing up, and now there's back end royalties, and so now BMI, ASCAP are like, okay, cool. This song, every single streaming service, every single TV show, every single thing, they have to turn in cue sheets, and so. BMI will get that cue sheet and say, okay, well, this song was played this many times, but we don't know who to pay. So then back-end royalty money is being lost. The filmmaker doesn't necessarily care about that because that's not money that they're personally paying out. They've already paid out their budget with the front-end royalty, but the musician ends up losing because they're not taking care of the back-end royalties. So
the musician never registered their song with BMI or ASCAP. They just gave it to their buddy
Yeah.
who's making to make it a film or whatever. Well, how do you register with BMI or ASCAP? Like, I just wrote the best song in the world. I want to register. What do I do?
funny you asked that. Chris?
Okay, we'll start. We'll start. Really, it's really simple. Really start wherever you're in the room and you're writing and you're producing. Whoever's in the room, you can probably identify. Okay, there's a side of music and there's a side of lyrics, right? So let's identify who's there first. Then, okay, how are we going to split the master? The master is who actually has the ownership of the recording. So, well, it could be like Alex. Alex paid for the studio session, studio time, paid for food, paid for everything. Well, he should own the master because he produced everything that happened in that room. But if a record person comes and says, or like a producer says, hey Alex, I like your music and I want to cut a song with you, then now you're using my studio, you're in my room, I can say, well, I'll give you 50% of the master, or I want to own all the master. But these have to be real conversations. Like, if you're not having conversations with your producers like this, red flag, okay? Yellow to red flag, okay? Because somewhere along the line, when it gets, let's say, to a theater, money's gonna come somewhere, and if you didn't get that in that first split sheet, there's gonna be issues. And then when someone can lock up the money, like if the producer says, "Oh, I'm gonna register it this way," and then you register it this way, now BMI's like, "That's not my problem. Y'all figure it out." And until y'all figure it out, you're not getting anything.
Yeah.
So that's like a weird little stipulation. It's like, well, shouldn't we go to court? No, it's locked up. So it's really important to have the conversation as soon as that song's completed of how to split that song.
The
recording master and
The writer.
writer and music, production.
The writer's share.
The writer's share. Correct.
And I'm a firm believer in the idea of like God or the universe or whatever you want to call it, like gifts you something when you're ready to handle it. And I think a lot of musicians miss out on opportunities because, like, honestly, with the majority of artists that I talk to, like, they couldn't handle a big opportunity dropping in their lap. Like, and that's sad to say, and that sucks to say, but like, if and I had that conversation with another producer the other day where he was asking me like, what am I supposed to be doing next in my career and this and that, and it's like, if I dropped you into a session with a big artist right now, could you run the session? Could you give them what they want? And if you can't answer yes to that question, then you know what you have to work on. So it's these boring conversations of, you know, we vibed out in the studio and then, all right, cool, great song. All right, I wrote this, you wrote that. Let's talk percentages. Let's talk business. That's the unsexy part of the music industry, but it's, if you don't have that ready, it's almost like other opportunities can kind of smell that and just like, we're not going to mess with that, because honestly, like most opportunities that are missed out aren't because of the song. It's just because like this song may be a little worse than this one, but this one's easier to clear. So with how do you do it, Chris? How do they do it?
So there's a couple of ways you can do it on paper, and that's the old way of doing things. But now there's a couple of apps and things that you can do to sit down and have the conversation. Or even if you leave, you can start a thread and it starts doing splits. We're going to put a QR code here soon in a little bit, and it's going to have all the places you should register your songs. And
Is it free to register your songs? Or do you have to pay when
all
you
of them.
register?
Everything's free.
Yeah.
I mean,
The only
one that charges is ASCAP.
Yeah.
But you can use BMI.
Yeah,
That was
BMI.
right. So-
Well, ASCAP to
Well, BMI
register
also-
To register yourself.
To register yourself.
register yourself,
And
not
the only
yourself.
thing that you actually have to pay to is the copyright. Like for an actual copyright,
That's
you do
correct.
have to pay for that. But actually registering your songs, like we've got a PDF that will have a QR code that'll link to, that's like literally just a list of all of the places. And for most of you that think you have a lot of those places, there's going to be a lot more names on that list that you probably weren't aware of. So yeah.
So that's one thing. And then if you have to take that and you have to submit it to BMI. That's step one.
Or ASCAP or
Or
CSAC.
ASCAP
Yeah.
or CSAC.
We're with
We-
BMI,
we're
so
with
that's
BMI,
why I
that's
keep
what
saying
we're
BMI.
Yeah, exactly. So if you can't have those difficult conversations, then that's some part of your growth that you have to start executing as a business person on the music side. It's not easy to sometimes do it because you started in the room and y'all were partying and it's a good old time, and now we have this awesome song. Well, then it's like, well, why do you want to not split it 50-50? Well, whatever the conversations are, when you start doing that, you start seeing your team. You really start seeing who's for the art and start seeing into the heart a little bit, which is important because you're basically having a baby with a song baby and you're going to birth it into the world, right? And you want it to be all good parenting, to say the least. So you get it all together, and then once you submit it to BMI, CSAC, or ASCAP, it registers, and then we take it. We use Songtrust, which is going to be on that list. Songtrust is an admin for globally to find and hunt down your money in certain platforms. There's other ones that will be on there, but Songtrust does a really good job for what they do. And they require you to submit the splits as well as BMI. And once you start going there, you can do all the rest. But they start giving you numbers there, IPI numbers. You have your IPI number. The song has a number, and then you start submitting them, and you just take it down.
And I'll say this, like this, when on the artist side of it, when people talk about like the label, I got signed with a record label and they're taking, this much percent and it's so unfair. When you are your own publisher and you're starting to like, okay, I was in the studio on Monday, but then on Tuesday I'm going to take care of all the business stuff that I have to do for the song, and then that spills over to Wednesday where I'm still registering things, and then that spills over to Thursday where I'm doing this. You're going to see why a record label takes so much percent, because making music is like this much of your time, and the rest of the time is the business side of it. It's the networking where, okay, how do I go to things like this, which is like, you guys being here is amazing because you could have been watching Netflix, you know,
Totally.
like you could have, and you're here, and that's a huge part of it. And so like, connect with us, connect with each other as well. Like everybody that was a film person that raised their hand, everybody that was a music person, like everybody needs to get everybody's number in
She's
here.
done like a junior high dance we have. All
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, go. And everyone would just stand against the wall and not get up. And
That's not a bad idea for an event.
I actually like to answer that question from the musician side and the film TV
Yeah.
producer side. So if it's a musician side, if you get a chance to score anything with anybody, do it. Don't hesitate.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's not your song. It's the director's vision. So if it sucks, he'll tell you it's not the thing. Don't take it personal. Keep working at it. It's almost like a learning tool. So that's number one. Number two is whenever it's done, that director or the producer has to submit the cue sheet. You cannot do it personally. It's not accepted. So you need to make sure everything's correct on that cue sheet, which on ASCAP and BMI, they have samples of how to fill that out correctly for you to submit it, because the distributor wants that before even they take that. So that's one thing. If you're a producer and you're broke, you should do a music video for the musician because you don't have the money to pay him. He's not going to work for hamburgers, bottom line. You know, it took him 20 years to learn all that, playing guitar, whatever, to do it. You have to do something else. You know, and there's no back end. If you go on streaming, the musician's screwed. So it doesn't make any difference. So the amount of time that the musician puts into a project is not going to make that money back unless it's a hit movie, it's you're winning an Oscar, Amazon comes and buys it out, and it's on the front page of it. Because most of 99% of these movies are going to end up at a place that you have to actually go search for it on Amazon or something like that. So you really need to bring something to the table for the musician. That's really the bottom line.
No, I think that's a really great point. Is, you know, there's the barter system.
The barter
You know,
system,
what's,
yeah.
What's the barter system? I
Yeah.
make a music video for you. I get to use your music
Oh,
in,
yeah.
in my song. Make sure it's registered and all the other kind
Oh,
of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
But how can you work together as artists in general that are both just starting out to benefit each other
Totally.
for that kind of stuff?
And to speak on that, like just today, like we're here. I got one of our videographers here. I got a photographer here. This network, a musician. Like we came together, like almost in the same car. Like we said, we're gonna meet here. Why? Because they're extended family. So that's just the way it is. Like if you guys need music, we have music. We have a publishing company. Reach out to us. What we have, a small budget. Talk, right? Hey, I met you at the Texas Theater.
doesn't hurt, yeah.
Like, we can make decisions for a lot of the songs that we administer. But you got to talk, you got to meet, you got to come out here, take time to do this connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Totally.
So something interesting too about this whole space, something for the last few years that I've noticed is the quantity of emails that I get from composers now that they'll see me listed on IMDb as producing a project that's coming up or whatever, and it's just like, hey, you need music for your film? Here's who I am. Here's a link to all my stuff, and it's been crazy. Like I can't keep track of the number of composers that are like just straight emailing people like that looking for film and television projects. It's become, I think, one of the primary ways to actually make money is via film and television,
Absolutely.
as opposed to, you're not selling
Yeah.
CDs anymore,
Right,
or
no
records
more.
anymore, right?
Whoa.
There's the, I was
Jesus.
like, wow, that's bright.
You
There's
can,
the, oh my gosh, the QR.
man.
QR code that I
God.
told you is going to be big.
It was coming.
There's the magic.
That's right.
If you don't download this, we've gotten blind.
Can you maybe talk a little bit about the composer side of it? Because I don't know, as far as the musicians in the audience, if it's like I'm a singer-songwriter, I've got a band or whatever it might be, a vocalist. But when it comes to the composing side, you're working directly with the filmmaker, and you're like, here's what I want the song or what I want the music to convey emotionally in this scene, and then you have to write the music
Yeah.
to that scene. I don't know if anybody's ever watched some of the behind the scenes of like big films, like, you know, whenever you see John Williams like directing an orchestra for Star Wars and,
Yeah.
and things like that. And that kind of stuff is amazing.
Yeah.
You know, that scale, that level.
Yeah, but-
But, you know, talk about a lot of our smaller filmmakers and everything on what's going on. What's that like on that composing side when, you know, you just want something specific that has to be written just for?
Well, you bring up John Williams. I heard this story from him, which is the most unbelievable thing. When he was working on Jaws, normally he had a house on the lot and with piano. That's all he did. So he called Spielberg. He's like, man, I think I got it. I got this soundtrack. So Spielberg goes over there and he goes, dong, dong. And then he looks at him. He's like, is he joking? You know, literally he thought it was joking. No, he's like, no, listen to this. Dong, dong. He's like, that's just, are you kidding me? He's like, yeah, but listen to it with the orchestra. He's like, I can't. I just hear dong, dong, which became the ultimate, you know,
Yeah.
Jaws music, right? So on the composer side of things, there's few things. Essentially, whenever I get a call from a director or a producer to work with a director, it's all about the vision of the director. There's two types of directors. One is a director that actually knows exactly what he's looking for, and he uses temp tracks to do the score. A lot of composers hate temp tracks because it's almost all over the place. I kind of like it because the reason for that is to me it gives me a direction, the timing
Takes
of
the
how
guesswork
everything
out
was
of it.
edited. Yeah, that, you know, and then you can have a conversation on overall what is the vibe of the movie, right? So and it makes it much easier because to me, when an editor cuts to music, the rhythm of cutting is better, you know, than just cutting it as a, you know, I'm working on a horror film right now. There's one scene that it's the coolest part of the scene. It's close up on this guy's face, and then all of a sudden the phone rings that they freak out. I'm like, so you guys, because they were not cutting it to music,
Right.
to them, the part that everybody freaks out is where the phone rings, but actually the scene that builds up on this guy's face is really the climax. Then you want to have time for the music to come down. Then you have the telephone ring, right? So then I call the director. I'm like, hey, you know what? If you add a few more seconds, if you just sit on this guy's face so I can fade out the music enough, I have enough time. So then you set up your other scene that the phone rings that they freak out. It works better. So you have to have so much of that conversation. There's a lot going on in there to make sure you guys really understand each other because it's bottom line his vision, it's his movie and his music.
And
All I'm doing is
or hers. Yes, their
These are hers. Yeah.
So also like with that kind of stuff, it's understanding that scoring, and this is on the composition side of it. The composition side of it, and that doesn't exclude singer, songwriter, artist, because
Oh, yeah.
you guys can be on the composition side of it as well. Even just straight musicians, like Birdman was just like
yeah,
drums
yeah.
the whole
Yeah.
time, and it was
Genius.
amazing.
yeah. He was an actor, pardon me.
But it's understanding, it's a different skill set than I'm going to write a 4-minute song, because working on film and I feel working on film helped me work with artists a little bit better because it was understanding the nuances of emotion, where I remember like working on these on a film, and it was halfway through the film and I turned in the cue, and the director was like, hey, this is super sad, and I like it, but we haven't gotten to the saddest moment yet. So we can't give away level 10 sad quite yet. So we need to go back a little bit. And that, like, for
Build it
me,
up.
that nuance and understanding, okay, how can I translate that into music? Now that goes back into another conversation that people don't want to hear, that artists don't want to hear, which is understanding like the theory stuff and understanding this. It's like the skills that I was able to get through stay in school. Like the skills that I was able to get to use the musical language to say, okay, if I extend this chord and I do that, then I can soften up the chord a little bit this way. And now it's a level 6 sad and not a level 9 sad. And that's different than just than what a singer songwriter can do with, well, I'm using words to convey this. And I think one of the things that helped us understand that was also working on commercial work, because like commercial work, and it's interesting because so many directors, like long form directors, started out with short scale form, like music videos or that kind of thing. Like that's a pretty common thread. And for artists, it's a little bit of the same thing. We've done a lot of stuff for just short form commercials where sometimes it's a minute long ad or a 30-second ad or a 15-second ad. And even we've done plenty of 6-second ads where in 6 seconds you have to sell, either like immeasurable joy or I'm so depressed that I need to buy this product.
Is
Like,
there anything in between? Is it always sadness and joy? You don't have
well, that's the other thing. It was like so the only other career that I ever considered other than music, it was always music for me, but for like a split second, I thought about studying psychology. And I
Which
even
is
looked
what
up.
actually paid my bills. It's the same.
So,
Dealing with people.
because it was always interesting to me, like understanding the human mind and human emotion, and just why people react the way that they react. And working on film made me think about that in a way that I really hadn't in a long time. The idea of it isn't just happy or sad. Is this am I mad? But is it a jealous mad? Is it this kind of mad? And a great record that I feel like does this is Adele's 21 record. So Adele's 21 record is about one thing. Like there is one situation that happened, and that record isn't about multiple situations. That record is about one thing that happened in her life, and 10 to 12 different emotions out of that. There's songs, and again, it's about one thing. And like rumor has it, is an angry, but it's not like
It's aggressive, like a little.
yeah, it's like a little bit of an attitude, jealous, angry, and so that's it's not red, it's like reddish orange. And understanding those little nuances is super vital, and I think not only helps in composition, but also helps in just songwriting, understanding, like not letting yourself get to just, oh, well, this is a happy song, this is a sad song, but some of the best songs are just, man, this is kind of in between where like you guys didn't end up together and it's good, but it's not. And
Attention.
yeah.
One thing actually I want to say from a composer dealing with a lot of producers that it is a totally educational thing for filmmakers. And 95% of filmmakers totally miss this. Whenever you want to make a movie, you go hire a line producer, right, to give you your budget, right? Now, the biggest problem with that is a line producer doesn't know what the post cost is exactly. And they have no clue what are the different levels of post. So they just give you a general number. So normally what happens is the producer says, okay, I got an editor, I know what the editing cost is, but they always miss out on animation and music and audio post.
Yeah.
Those are three things. So you really want to bring a post supervisor to give you a budget of how much composition is going to cost you, how much your licensing is going to cost you based upon what you have on the script, and how much is your audio post.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because a lot of the projects I've worked on, when you're shooting, you end up spending all your money shooting and more, and you always end up cutting it from post.
That's
You're like,
exactly.
all right, where can we take away? All right, we had $10,000 for music composition. It's now $5,000.
Yeah.
And that number keeps getting lower. And that's like the easiest thing to always go back and cut. But if you can actually get those numbers in advance, and it's hard to do once you're on set and things go wrong.
Right.
You're just pulling money from anywhere you
Right.
can in the budget, but to keep that number in there. And so there's an interesting way. Let's say there's an Adele song. It's like, I have to have this Adele song in my film, but you can't afford an Adele song. But there's a way to have that Adele song without
Adele.
That's
right?
exactly
Yeah.
right. Yep.
Where you use her song, but you have somebody else
Right.
Sing
Cut
it.
it.
Yep.
record it,
Yep.
and then it's cheaper because you're only paying for a portion of it. You're not paying for her master or whatever. Talk a little bit about that on these sort of alternative ways to take a really popular song you want in your project, but get it for less, because I'm going to have my friend who's a musician sing the song and perform the song instead of Adele or U2 or, you know, Britney Spears,
Yeah.
whoever else, whatever it might be.
So I think some of that goes into, and I'll just throw an idea out there, like with producers, I think we get to do this a little more than singer-songwriters do, because we often get the, hey, can I get a song that sounds specifically like this? And so on the production side, we have that, we practice that technique pretty often. On the singer-songwriter side of it, like if you're an actual songwriter, something that you probably don't do that often, which when we all learned our instruments, we learned our instruments by learning other songs, right? Like, I'm gonna make myself look really uncool right now, but when I started learning guitar, I was really into Creed. Don't lie,
The 90s
a lot of you were into Creed as well. And so I learned, and so a lot of my guitar playing sounded like Creed at the beginning. But as songwriters, so we learn our skill by emulating, right? You definitely want to develop your own style, but as a songwriter, what's to stop you from saying, you know what, as a challenge to myself, I don't like, let's say you've allotted time to write, which is something that every songwriter should do. Like, don't just write when you're inspired, allot time to write. But let's say you've allotted, every morning from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. that this is when I'm going to write. And that morning you wake up and you're just like, I'm not inspired to write on my own. I'm not inspired I just don't have anything to write about. Give yourself a challenge of the skill that is really crucial in these specific moments where it's, you know what, I'm going to try to write an Adele song, or I'm going to try to write. And this also comes into play where if you start paying attention to films and you start seeing, man, I keep seeing this song come up. There's songs that just every single movie, we just keep seeing it. Then let that be a light bulb and say, okay, I'm going to try to write a song like that. And what if you get together with another producer who's in the room right now and say, hey, why don't we get together every week or every 2 weeks or something, and let's just try to write our own version of a song that we heard on that. That's a skill that maybe those songs don't specifically do something, but when opportunities come up where, again, it goes back to relationships, where you've run out of your budget and from social media that like Amanda is getting together every week and writing, like, I'm doing my cover, like I'm doing something in the style of this, and you're seeing her write, and all of a sudden you're like, I need this kind of song. She's writing, she's in my vision. I've connected with her on social media. I know that she's actively doing this. That's an easy call. And so that's where networking is important. That's where social media is important. Visibility is important. And then when they call, that you have the technique to be able to accomplish the task, because that's a huge part of it. It's just when you get the job, if you can't do the task, you're not going to get called again. So
12 hours.
No, and
Let's get some questions from the audience.
really quick, I think because what you were asking was, let's say you're a filmmaker and you want that Adele song, but you know a singer-songwriter in the city, you can say, hey, can you cut this for me? And now it's the song, but it's not Adele. And you can still, now use that and acquire that song and use it, and probably, get it in the mix way easier because it's not the actual song.
Because that's what I always think when,
Yeah.
when I'm watching something and I hear a song and it's not the original artist. I was like,
Right.
oh, they couldn't afford the original
Yeah,
song.
right.
That's where my brain goes.
Yeah.
Well, but also there's some
But
really
it's
cool
also
songs.
sometimes they'll make changes to it.
That's-
like
yeah.
So anybody that watched Westworld on HBO, if you watch Westworld and you listen to music on that, I'm like, wait a minute.
yeah.
That is like an orchestral version
Yeah.
of Black Hole Sun
Right,
or something,
right.
And it just plays differently. And I was like, oh, that is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you hear a song that's really familiar, but you don't know you're like, it's not the original song, you don't know what it is, but so you can change.
Right.
There's
and
an-
I think we see a lot of this on TikTok, and I know TikTok is like a love-hate relationship, but you hear
Don't
like,
try Montana.
but you hear these songs and then someone like slows it down and it's like
Yeah.
a different vibe and it's like a little darker and it's like
cool.
Yeah.
There's an
and you look
Apple-
it up and it's like on Spotify. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I found this.
There's
song.
an AirPods commercial right now covering the Pixies' "Where's My Mind," and it's a great version of it. It's a cool, and I mean, that's a huge part of it. And then again, like you're getting better as a songwriter because you're learning somebody else's song that was popular. And so it's, why did this song work? Well, this is a great melody. This is a great this. These are great lyrics. So that practice of, look, let's try to write a song like this. Or let's take this song and
Make it around.
make it our own. Like now you've got a completely new master recording. Yeah, you don't own the writer's share of it, you know, but you could own the new master of it because it is your version of the song now. And you can actually, like if you're only releasing it on streaming services, if you're not actually making physical copies of it, you actually don't have to cover the, like to pay for, like to put it on streaming. Like the streaming services as of like a year ago or 2 years ago, they're responsible for covering like the licensing
The
cost
splits
of it.
and all that stuff.
So you don't, like if you're just putting it on streaming, you could do cover songs and post them on Spotify and get streaming money from that. And again, with something we said super earlier, if you're popping off on social media, if you do a cover, and I've been waiting for somebody to do this, so take this idea, I've been wanting to hear an updated version of Just a Girl by No Doubt, like a cool version of, I feel like that could be really cool for a film.
That actually would be a great.
Right? But if somebody did that and all of a sudden it's your cover song, again, don't do it like No Doubt, do a different version of it.
Right.
Like, if that's blowing up on TikTok, if that's blowing up on Instagram, if that's blowing up, I guarantee you, like somebody, if not Apple or somebody is going to call you saying, hey, can we use that song for our commercial? Like that's not the easy way to get there, but you know, if you're popping off like that, like you'll get those calls. So
Well, let's grab some questions. All right there.
Hi, I'm Abby.
hello, Abby.
As an artist, you mentioned, being prepared for that 24-hour. What are some things that, I know you mentioned just like time frames, but making sure that you're prepared and that you have the capability to meet the need. Can you provide a specific example to what that is in reference to? Like if it's like a task specifically, or if it's like you get multiple requests?
So there's two ways. One is actually if you're dealing with any music supervision services, which that's another thing. Is that on the music? Okay, so be sure to. So if you're dealing
But
with.
are you listed on
Yeah,
that?
yeah. I need to actually. I need to make it. So if you're dealing with music supervision services, what happens is normally they send you what they call a brief, which explains to you exactly. Well, let me rephrase that. They think
What they think. Yeah.
exactly, what they're looking for. Sometimes if you get it from an ad agency, just because of the ad agency guy doesn't want to get in trouble, so it says like Michael Jackson meets Metallica. Literally, it's because they don't want to be the bad guy. 50 people have to okay it. So you have to guess the best way. And sometimes they tell you what song they're actually cutting this thing to. So the beats per, for how many beats that they're cutting to already. And so they send you a general direction, or they send you links actually on YouTube. That's what happened to me last time. They sent a bunch of links, and by the way, what I submitted, it wasn't not what they wanted, but I ended up with. Because what happens is the music supervisor accumulates a bunch of songs, goes, sits down with the producer and the director, starts playing for them, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh man, we actually like this better, and it's a completely different thing, So it's just, that's really the process. But they send you some ideas of what they're looking for.
And then the second thing, so it's the ability to do that really quickly. That's the technique part of it. So like if right now I told you, hey, there's a film and they need a song that sounds like Rumor Has It by Adele, but we need it by 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Can you, Abby, specifically could you deliver a recorded, mixed, and mastered version by 8 a.m. tomorrow?
Right.
So,
Beautiful. No,
one,
no,
that
that's a
should be
good
the
answer.
answer.
That's a good answer.
That's always
Yes,
the answer.
yes, I will do that, yeah.
Yes,
By the way,
and
I
then you
have it
figure it
ready to
out.
go.
Yes, and then you figure it out. So again, if you can't do it, you have a network of people that it's like, hey, I've got this opportunity. If we've got to stay up all night, we're gonna get it done. 100%. I won't tell.
Yeah.
that
It's
truth, but-
always yes. It's always yes.
So
Yeah.
so it's either that, and then the second thing that he was gonna say is, a lot of times it's not a can you make this for us? But hey, you don't have till 8 a.m. tomorrow. It's 3 o'clock. You have until 5 p.m. Do you already have something like this in your library? And so the being prepared aspect of it is designating time every week to be front loading on tracks. That's where it's, you know what, I'm going to set a day aside. If I'm working on music 5 days a week, 4 days a week, I'm going to work on my own stuff. One day, I'm going to create tracks that maybe could be for me, but I'm going to gear it towards film and TV because, like, what may be for you, like, I as an artist, I always encourage you as an artist to, like, make what you need to make as an artist. Like, 100%. Don't ever let that go because that may not ever be syncable. Like, but you need that. So sometimes it is. Sometimes you just have the sound that people are looking for, and that's awesome. Maybe you have the sound that people will be looking for in 10 years. But also have the skill of, you know what, just as an exercise, I don't do rock, but let me make a rock song today, you know? And you may find a niche of that. Like your style may be like just straight up lounge jazz, but for some reason you're incredible at like heavy metal songs and you just haven't you just get really good at that. So you get those made to order briefs, but then you also have to be ready with, hey, you've got 2 hours, do you have this? And if you've been doing that consistently, it's like, well, I've got 100 tracks that I've made over the last year. I've got to have something in there. So that's the preparedness.
I'm going to
Also-
add to that.
Also, I'm going to add to that, but
Okay.
also whenever you're doing that, make sure you're bouncing stems because
Yes.
that's the first thing they're going to ask you.
Yeah.
So you really want to prep your session in a way that you're bouncing stems, and then now
Can you
requirement.
explain what that is?
So stems essentially is drums separate, bass separate, vocal separate, because what they tend to do, if you have too much, first of all, if there's a lot of dialogue, they don't want that much vocal.
Right.
So, and what you don't want to happen to your music, that they bring the volume so low that you can't even hear it. So, because all they care about is the dialogue, right? So there's a couple of things if you're mixing for film and TV. Number one, you have to mix wide. So the panning of what you do normally has to be wider than normal. So everything almost has to be left and right because dialogue is the king. So that has to be in the middle. So that way they crank up your music without stepping over the dialogue, right? And then the other thing is you want to give them access. If you have some vocals, normally they bring the vocal lower underneath. So that's why you want to tell them, I do have this stem. So whenever you're bouncing stuff, just make sure your session is in a way that you already have those stems ready to go. Bass separate, music separate, piano separate, or whatever.
I'd also say, let's say you take John's advice and you do for a year, right? All this stuff. And you have all these friends you did stuff with, and you did a song a year ago, and you didn't do the split sheets. You didn't register the song. You're going to have a hard time becoming a one-stop shop if it's been a year. So you need contracts, right? So shameless plug, on our website, we have some packets for publishers, their templates, and for our artists and producers. You can get them. I put them down for half price today, so you can have them there. It's really cheap, I promise. The one thing we've learned to do is invest in networking, like Rini, right? I met Rini in LA. We were at a
Taxi conversion.
what was it?
Music
The Music Expo, which is for music supervisors and A&Rs. That was not cheap. So I promise you, it won't even be 1/20th of what I paid to go do that. So there's resources that you can get, but you're going to need them because if you don't have a contract, then you don't have anything to prove that is something you guys created collectively and who owns the masters.
Yeah. So that preparedness is not just the music part of it,
Right.
but like, again, organization where it's like, all right, that one day a week that I'm going to work on, this kind of thing, I'm going to work for 6 hours, but then I'm going to designate 1 hour to take care of the business side of it, like to do the contract, to bounce out stems, to do, all of that, so that the question that you just always have to be asking yourself is, if someone came up to you, if a film person came up to you and said, you got an hour to turn this in, can you turn it in?
Right.
Like, if you can't, then you got, some more, because that is how fast it moves. Like, it really, we get briefs every day that it's just like, 3 p.m. Eastern time, New York time. And then you're like, well, crap, we're in Dallas. So like, I've already lost an hour. So that's just how it is.
And for record labels, and I'm gonna shed this really quickly. Amin and I were at NAMS one day. Have anyone's gone to NAMS here? And who was the guy? The guy from Sony Latin.
Yeah.
So we met him. He introduced me to him, and he's like, I said, I have 3 artists, and they know the business. I've sat with them. Because his first question is like, well, what kind of artists? Like, are they ready to go? And remember him? He's like, I just don't want to mess with having to teach someone how this works.
Yeah.
And I was like, these guys are ready. Like, this was before COVID, man. That was such a good situation. But if you're not ready just as an artist or musician, or even, doing all this paperwork behind the scenes, you can get locked up, like locked down. Like, you're not going to be used. You're not going to be signed. You're not going to be in any of those things. So just anytime you do something, just clear it really quick.
Yeah, I lost the cut on an NFL project just because one of the publishers was not responding in time. So,
Question over here?
Yes, I just have a question because how do you see right now the market in Dallas for musicians? They want to enter in the industry compared to other markets. For example, you mentioned Los Angeles, like New York. How do you see that the market is right now?
So if everybody can't hear her, she's asking how the Dallas market compares to other markets like LA and other areas.
I would say for artists, on the artist side, people in Dallas love to make music, and unfortunately, they don't take the time to learn the business side, and so it just stays here. And from the outside looking in, it's just a hobby way of life. There's very few people, and the people that have, they've either had a team or have had someone that will take the time and lead them and guide them to do everything correctly. But I don't think Dallas is seen that way, not because of the talent. Talent is amazing.
it's amazing here, yeah.
Talent, LA plucks and New York plucks the best artists out of Dallas
Yeah.
and Houston, Texas, period. But I'm telling you, there's so much talent in North Texas and UTA and the local, all the music, SMU and classical. Like, I know, I've had friends that I went to college with that are like touring opera, like all kinds of music. So I think that what's happened in Dallas is because in LA, split sheets are a conversation right way. And it's easy.
Yeah.
Let's go. Like, if you go to any songwriting, anything with anyone, it's going to be like, oh, let's finish the split sheet before you leave. Here, it's so like, oh, I don't want to talk about it. And it's like, until Dallas levels up and has a business mentality of the art, and if you just want to do art, that's great too. Like, make the music, and it's beautiful, because that's the beauty of art. But on the other side, if this city wants to be looked at as a music city, a music business city, those are the things, and that's why I think we're having things like this, where we're
Yeah.
elevating the mindset of, how do you do this for real? How can I live off of this? Because as much as you want to, do this for fun, you got to eat, got to pay for rent,
Yeah.
And so doing all these things and getting connected to the right people, I think makes what you're saying very, very important for the outside to look at us like a music.
I think
musically, this town is all about cover bands.
That's
So
true.
unfortunately, that's where they're paying the most amount of money, which is
Live
because
music.
because live music, because of bars, right?
Right.
The bar owner really doesn't care. He just wants to sell out in his bar. So they bring a lot of cover bands, unfortunately. But one thing for me, that's what's been happening since COVID. A lot of producers I work with, even in LA, they don't live in LA anymore. They go to LA, do business, and everything's online. So my suggestion is, as much as you can, put stuff on social media. Just
Yeah.
as much as possible, because they're discovering people that way. Record labels, the A&R people, they no longer go to a club to watch anybody. They essentially have services that tells them which artist is doing well on which platform. And
Spikes.
that's how they contact the artist. So social media.
And then the other thing that I'll add to that is, I think one of the things that LA is really good at is the idea of, like, when you work out at home by yourself, it's not the same as when you go work out at a gym and you're seeing a bunch of people that look better than you, and you're like, oh crap, I need to look like that.
Nashville is the same way. Yeah.
And it's the same thing. Like when you're in that environment, in LA, in Nashville, you see that constantly. And so if you're in LA a week in like actual sessions, by the end of that week, you'll realize what you don't know.
Well, you either quit or
You quit. And I think that's a great experience. And I don't necessarily think that experience only has to happen in LA, which is why this is such a beautiful thing. Like people getting together, and honestly, like the mindset of that is just different because of the way that the city's built, because we have houses with big old lawns that, like, I only know one of my neighbors, like that's just what it is. But in LA, you have to go to events. You have to go, even if you're being fake and you're talking to people that you don't care about talking to, like you do. And then in New York, you're riding on a subway with like everybody. So like you can't not see the world, but here we have the luxury of that, and I think we have to work against that. So as musicians, as artists, as filmmakers, we have to force ourselves to come together more, because if we don't do that, then we're working out alone at home. And people, like, that's why CrossFit is such a big thing and all of that, because it's like you all encourage each other. And if Dallas can wrap their mind around that, like, the talent that we have here, like I've been in sessions in LA where I'm like in there and I'm just like, really? Y'all are LA musicians? Like, you guys are like,
it's the same thing in the acting world. You'll have a project and you're casting people, and they're like, we're bringing this actor in from LA, and the actor comes in from LA. It's like, I could have hired somebody like this locally.
Yeah,
And
100%.
it's because you brought the actor from LA.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing. So, other questions? What do we got? Right here.
Yeah, so as a musician, I'm not necessarily looking to score stuff or write stuff overnight, but I have a catalog of original stuff, and let's say, for the sake of argument, that it's awesome. I mean, it's Grammy kind of stuff, and it's not just my mom that likes it, right?
It's my dad too.
How do I approach guys like you and get access to other music supervisors or whatever, and convince you my stuff doesn't suck, and that it's worth the time to listen to some of it? And if I know specifically you got a project like, hey, I need a kind of a rockabilly song about two people that love each other, and I've got that, and I said, hey, I think I got something that fits your project. I mean, how do we start that? How do we break that ice? And then how do we start
It's the same way that you get a record deal. You make it as easy as effing possible for me to not have to do any work. Like, literally. Like, if you come up to me, you come up to anybody and say, hey, I've got this is the style, this is the genre, I've done the metadata on this, it's registered, here's the stems, here, go as far as, and this is something that composers do a lot, like on the actual composition side of it, is like, here's an example of what this song could sound like in a scene. I took a clip from YouTube or whatever, or even if you're approaching a director, you take some of his past work, some of his or her past work, and say, hey, I scored a song, like, hey, I have this song, and then I put it to your other work, and it fits perfectly. Do you have anything else coming up? Also doing the research, like IMDb is a great resource of finding music editors, music supervisors, but it's the same way that you would approach also like press. If you write to a music writer in a newspaper, and you're like, hey, listen to my song, and they're like, I don't know you. But if you approach them saying, hey, your article on this and that was great, and I vibe with this, I specifically read this, and you are the specific person that I need to get to, because like I may not be the rockabilly person that you need to get to, but IMDb will tell you what that one movie that you really liked had, that rockabilly style, that whatever. So IMDb is a great resource, but one, make it as easy as possible for me. The other thing is, two other things. One, again, networking, sometimes that's going to mean, like, I as much as I do believe that Dallas is a great music city, business still happens in LA, New York, and Nashville. So a lot of the investment sometimes is just, we've done that. Like, you just have to go out there and spend a week or two out there and just connecting with people, because I've said this to people. I don't think that you get into the room because of your talent. I think you get into the room because of relationships, but you stay in the room because of talent. And so relationships is the big part of it, just truthfully.
Well, and that's how, for myself personally, and what I always tell people on the film side stuff is go to film festivals, go to film festivals, and meet people at film festivals. What exists on the music side that is like that, where it's music conferences? I know there's songwriter conferences, there's different things like that. So there are resources like that where you could get, like a film festival, you can go network with like-minded people and make those connections.
So BMI and ASCAP both do a lot of events. You know, we think about BMI and ASCAP as just, you know, get me my royalties and pay me. But they are there to serve the artists.
Right.
Like, they are there, and they put on so many different events. Some of them, truthfully, are not in Dallas. So a lot of that has to go out there. Now, there are other cities that are, you know, becoming big film hubs. Like, you know, Atlanta is a big one. Georgia is, you know, this as a state is a big one. Oklahoma, there's a lot of filming going on. Louisiana, there's a lot of filming going on. So that kind of research
We're bringing
into,
it all to Dallas.
but we're bringing it all to Dallas now. And so doing the research of who are the specific types of people. Now, the other thing is music bed libraries. So music bed libraries, there's a website called taxi.com that has it. There's a lot. If you just look for like sync houses, sync libraries, these are companies that a lot of music editors use specifically, where you don't necessarily have to go to LA all the time and make relationships, but you submit your music to a music library and they house all the music, and the music supervisors will go to those companies and say, hey, we need something in this kind of thing. And, you know, there's a huge list of those kinds of things that I think we'll probably make a post about it here.
There's a lot of music libraries. I know I've used a lot of them, and other filmmakers have. And, you know, even for just digital content, you're cutting, you know, some digital commercial, whatever, and you're like, all right, I just go to this, like, I keep saying Soundcheck is the only one that pops up.
Yeah.
But you find it, you pay whatever you're paying for your license fee, and you can scroll all different kinds of music and find it. So I guess you're saying you can put your music up on these libraries.
One more little thing. Don't send 20 tracks.
Yep.
Send two or three.
Yeah.
Send two or three that match. Do like he said, the homework, and they said, oh, this is just like this that you did in this, and they'll open up a little more to you, specifically music supervisors. And they got time, but also communicate with them like they communicate. Everybody should have disco. Okay, that's how a lot of them receive music. You can send music to disco. It has the metadata. You can tag your songs. You can
Disco.
No Dropbox.
Disco.ac
Yeah.
is an organizational website for music.
I thought you were just going to start doing Saturday Night Fever.
No,
Great soundtrack.
Essentially, you upload all your music in there,
Right.
and you send a link. You can keep track of who's listening to it, who's not. There's all your information
open
on there,
it, right.
rather than
There's
a
metadata
Dropbox
in
that somebody has to
there.
download stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you have a huge library, you can say this type of film, and if you've tagged it, it'll pop up all the songs.
So that's part of the making my job easier.
Right.
Like, if you send a disco link with, hey, here's 3 songs that fit perfectly with what you just did, and if you have a project that's coming up like this, because I've done the research and I know specifically what kind of work you're doing, and then these songs are all clear, they're all one stop, I've done the metadata, the stems, blah, 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 people will have conversations with that
Right.
versus,
Jump
yo,
on
here's a SoundCloud link I don't know who owns this song, and it has a sample,
exactly.
and I did it on YouTube. So like,
Yes.
Are period pieces more expensive to do when it comes to like getting the rights to the music? So is it cheaper to get more contemporary music? Or?
All right, her question is, are period pieces more expensive
Okay,
as far as music?
I can answer that. I work with Chubby Checker, and he recut all his own masters, and he was trying to work at any deal that he could to get his music cut. The key was his publisher. So, and then different publishers owned his music. So some of them much easier to work with. Some of them, I can give you an example. I did a movie with James Woods, and the writer of a song that wrote a song for Tina Turner talked to the director. Hey, you can have my song for $25,000. The publisher would not release the song to the producer. So it just depends who's the publisher. It's one of those things you have to research and you have to talk to these guys.
And I think actually, there's actually a really good point for some of the filmmakers to know. Just because you want a song, and even if you have the money to pay for a song,
Yep.
sometimes they won't let you use it if they don't like how it's being used. In the
That's
film.
exactly. They want the usage, and also if they have it. So songs are like stocks, right? So after a while, the value goes down, and then you can get them really cheap. But if a commercial picks them up,
Yeah.
all of a sudden they're paying like $200,000 for that. So the value of the whole catalog has gone up at that point. So it just really depends on what.
and an artist on the conversation of period pieces, like when we're talking about that extra day to just work on random stuff, focus on period piece music. Like, who's seen one of the greatest shows ever, Peaky Blinders? Like, Peaky Blinders is a lot of like period pieces, but some of them are like modern songs, but then either they're new songs but done in the old way, that kind of thing. Period pieces are a big thing, and if you are an artist that is like, okay, well, I'm gonna just work on a couple of period pieces. Like there's like Postmodern Jukebox did like a bunch of stuff, like old timey kind of stuff, and they popped off on social media, and it's like, okay, well, they have that sound. I don't need to pay for that.
Yep.
And I actually have the opportunity to get stems.
Oh, yeah,
because
yeah.
like Chubby Checker isn't giving you stems.
No.
You know?
Well,
like,
he was
that's-
willing to give you whatever.
Yeah, that's
You know,
but if
8
you
by
can-
10 size,
if
10
you can
autograph
offer,
pictures.
because we do get recently we got something that it was like, we need something that sounds like it's from the 1930s, and very specifically that. And if you are able to fill, like, I mean, it's straight business. Like, what gaps are there in the industry, and then how can you find the gaps, and then how can you fill those gaps? And like, period pieces are a big part of the industry that a lot of artists aren't doing.
Couple of things for musicians I have to say, because this is stuff I'm learning myself. I met this kid. He was going to college. He was a producer. He was making beats on YouTube. He started making about $180,000 a year, just licensing his music on YouTube. And the reason he was using YouTube, because their copyright detection is amazing.
Yeah.
And so, he licenses it to every singer wants to sing on a beat or a song, right? So essentially, he was licensing these from $50 to $2,000. Just depends, but it's non-exclusive. And then he said, every day I wake up, there's a services that I go on there. It tells me who's using my song without
That's
paying
genius.
me, and I just email them. I just say, hey, are you going to pay me, X amount of dollars, or we can work something out? If he can't, he just pulls the song out. So, and another guy that I know that actually started doing a channel. All he did covers of Hans Zimmer.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just him, a girl violin player and a cello player. They're at over 40 million views, and now he's charging $4,000 a show within 18 months. But it takes a lot of work, and then now he's starting his own composition channel, which is promoting his composition. So there's other ways of getting your music out there,
Let's do like one more question and we'll wrap it up. All right, guys, he's waving frantically in the back.
Okay, you guys are doing a great job. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
This is my question. For the lyrics part, like when Tony said something about using an Adele song and kind of rewriting it. So what about the license, the right to use the lyrics?
So
Sorry, let me just
no, go for it.
On another thing is, I subscribe to a couple of platforms like Audio Jungle. One is Epidemic Sound or something like that. So, but I've had a situation whereby I used a song for a trailer, you know, and they gave me the license, you know, like once you download it, you download the license and all of that, and I put it on YouTube, and it got flagged. So in a situation like that, you know, what do I do? Then for the musicians, how does it work, you know, putting your music on platforms like that, you know, like Audio Jungle?
So it's a couple of questions. One, you used an Epidemic Sound song, and then did you get a copyright strike on YouTube and they pulled it?
What they said is I can't monetize it. But I can
You can't monetize it, right? Yeah, you can still use it, but you cannot
That's correct.
monetize it for your song, right? So they'll run ads on that particular video
without giving me money.
and without giving you any money but you had a license for the song.
Yes.
Did you file a copyright, or did you file
No.
an appeal?
I didn't.
Because you can go through, YouTube
Right.
has its
Yep.
own backend system, you can file an appeal, you can show them your license and all that kind of stuff, it's a process, but you can do that. basically. But then the second part of the question, how do you get the other rights just for the lyrics and the music itself, and then somebody re-record it to be used as well?
So that's a little bit of a deeper question, because now that's going into like understanding like publishing, which is like we don't have time for like a course on the depths of publishing. But when you're changing lyrics, that's
Are you talking about changing lyrics or just using lyrics and music and so new artists re-recording?
Re-recording it, maybe rewriting it, but if it's so obvious that that is an Adele song.
Well, rewriting, a lot of times they won't let you do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
So
cannot-
like if
yeah,
you
I know that person.
if you rewrite a lyric of a song, like if I am, you know, take something by the Beatles and I'm like, you know, something in the way, you know, she moves, you know, whatever. If I change it like that, like I can't clear that, because that's essentially called like an interpolation of like an different interpretation of
Co-writer of
it. And I can't do that. I'd have to get permission to change the lyrics that way, and I mean, they're not going to clear that. So that's unless you're
Those are parodies, though.
Right.
Yeah, the parodies are different.
Parodies are different under copyright law.
Yep.
We won't get into whole copyright.
and that's why like that's a deep question. Which so with that, it's a very deep question with that, and not that I'm trying to avoid it, but it's just like there's so many things with
Entanglements
that.
that could happen.
Get a good music supervisor to work with, and they'll be able to work you through the process.
Yeah.
And then also understanding, so one, everybody should own this book forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, which is All You Need to Know About the Music Business by Donald Tasman, where anybody that knows us has heard us talk about that book a gazillion times, because it was written by a lawyer. And so a lot of those kinds of questions, you're hearing them answered specifically by someone with a lawyer brain. Also, it wouldn't be a bad idea to like, and again, we're all investing in what we do. It wouldn't be a bad idea to take a couple $100 and find a music lawyer, an hour of their time, and just, hey, let me pay you an hour, whatever your fee is, and for an hour of your time, come in with questions, those kinds of things, and have them answer it for you. Like, that's cheaper than a college course, right? Than a semester's long college course. Or even just like if you found a lawyer in LA and they were coming through town or whatever, and you were like, man, I will pay you $200 and buy you dinner and all of this if you sit with me for an hour and I can just pick your brain, like, why wouldn't they do that? And yeah, it's an investment, but I mean, why not? Because a lot of the things that you're dealing with are very like intricate lawyer questions.
Well, a lot of that stuff is happening right now. I can tell you, because the lawyer I work with, actually part of his job is every day they check out to see who did what song on social media, and they send them a cease and desist letter. That's their job. Like they're making these lawyers are making a lot of money just doing that, 2 hours a day. So because everybody's changing those on TikTok and all that stuff.
Well, so like cover videos are very popular on
Mm-hmm.
YouTube. Someone does a cover of I don't want to keep using Adele, but we're using
Yeah.
Adele. Somebody does a cover of Adele and they put it on YouTube and it gets 5 million views. And the reason those are able to work for that person is because then Adele is still getting the money from the
Yep.
advertising.
Yep.
So you're not getting the money from the advertising, even though you sang it. You're singing her song.
Right.
So you get 5 million views, you get $0. She gets the money for it, but what that does is it elevates you as an artist, and people see who you are,
Right.
and then potentially you can do other things
Right.
from there. So we've been talking for a while here, so we're going to wrap up, but I want to give everybody a round of applause up here.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.